Today, I am so honored to have a very special guest by the name of Ann Dowsett Johnson. We are speaking about the intimate relationship between women and alcohol. And we're going to also talk about how we can, recover from challenging times in our lives through the power of writing. The Changemaker Leader podcast and membership is for leaders to discover their leadership DNA and build their brand from the inside and out, surrounded by supportive community. I'm Leigh Mitchell, your host and the founder of the Changemaker Leader movement. I am your brand strategist, helping you on your journey to impact more lives. Speaking live with the author of Drink, The Intimate Relationship Between Women and Alcohol, a book named one of the year's top 10 by Washington Post. Part memoir, part journalistic exploration, the book exposes the pinking of the alcohol industry. Together, we will explore how writing memoirs, personal essays, or even short reflections can help you process big life transitions, grief, burnout, or change your relationship with alcohol. Ann is an award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and psychotherapist. For more than 25 years, she worked at Maclean's magazine, where she was best perhaps known as the chief architect for the Maclean's University rankings. She worked as Vice Principal, Development, Alumni and University Relations at McGill University. Since writing Drink, Ann worked hard to destigmatize mental health and addiction, earning an honorary Doctor of Laws from Queen's University for her efforts. She's also the recipient of Transforming Lives Award from the Center of Addiction and Mental Health, the American Research Society on Addictions Media Award, plus the TA Sweet Award for Ontario Psychiatric Association for helping address stigma related to mental health and addiction. Ann followed a dream to get a Master's of Social Work at Smith College and now has a psychotherapy practice specializing in working with women in life transitions. What motivated you to take on all of these achievements?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Leigh. It's a real treat to be here. What motivates me is story. So I think it's the theme between my journalism career, which was 30 years at Maclean's, or my psychotherapy practice, which is delving into story with clients and what motivates them in their lives and what they're dealing with. And in my book, Drink, which is, of course, looks at myself. It's a memoir of my own drinking history and my mother's drinking history. Looks at my being the poster girl for the modern alcoholic, isn't a word I love, but person with substance abuse disorder who really was hijacked by the pinking of the alcohol market. You know, a whole generation of women, multiple generations of women have been the target of the alcohol industry. And we can talk about that a little bit more. So story is the theme for me. I'm a vigilant person and I like to connect the dots for individuals about what's going on in the world, what's going on in a person's world. And that's the theme for me. 5 years ago, when I became a psychotherapist, realized that I wanted to also keep my storytelling hat on. And so I started a really, I think, wonderful course called Writing Your Recovery, which is for any woman who has a story of grief or loss or probably substance use, doesn't have to be. And it's an 8-week in-person course. It's on Zoom, but I'm there. It's not canned. It's not as many courses are. And I took this course live to South Africa, where I had spent time as a little girl. And it was the first time that I was back there since 1963, when I traveled there in November. And I had 26 people in the class. and it was dynamic, transformative, really, really intimate. 5 days of sharing stories and stories that you couldn't believe. And I'm launching that course again online on January the 21st. I hope that some listeners will think about signing up. It is for women only. But it has both a daytime and an evening option, and you can go to my website and find out more about it. But it's an opportunity to find out everything you need to find out if you want to write a book, everything from beginning to end, how to get an agent, how to get a publisher, how to get started, back to front to back. And these were the questions I wanted to know answered when I wanted to write Drink, the intimate relationship between women and alcohol, my book. And I didn't know how you got an agent. I didn't know the first thing about those stories. But so I customized this course for anyone with those questions in mind. And we've had wonderful people over the past 5 years, hundreds of people who have written their books, and it's very exciting. Yeah, I love it. It's very dear to my heart.
Yeah. So if someone was interested in taking this program, but like many of us are probably intimidated about, the aspects of, like you said, finding the publishing side of it, and, let alone like just figuring out what words you want to share.
Right.
So how do we commit to something like that when it feels really scary?
The first thing is to take it apart and into bite-sized pieces. And so we begin very slowly with prompts and writing 750-word small vignettes, and then get a little more comfortable with larger pieces and putting those pieces together in what I call quilt squares into a quilt. And then you've got a chapter, and then you've got a couple of chapters, and before you know it, you have the beginning of a book. We talk a lot about structure and all the things you need to know about. I think it's a really transformative course, a really exciting course. And as I say, hundreds of people have taken it. It's so successful that when the course ends, many people don't want to say goodbye to their peers, their classmates. So we have a second course called Writing Your Discovery, which goes year round. And some people have been together for 3 and 4 years as groups. And then I run writing retreats where we get to meet in person, which is really, really special and really fun. And we're doing one, I think, in Quebec this fall, and we've done them in Los Angeles. We've done them in Chester, Nova Scotia. We've had a great time.
Well, I love that you gave a shout out to Nova Scotia, because I have Nova Scotian roots, and I have a lot of friends and family that are probably listening from Nova Scotia, and love the fact that you came to Nova Scotia to put on one of these programs. So that's really cool. So let's talk a little bit about your transition, right? Your why. So walk me through your career. You started out at Maclean's magazine, and you had a very successful career, and then you did go on to McGill.
Right.
Tell me a little bit about those two jobs and what you learned about yourself, and how that ultimately served as a step towards a new goal, new ambitions. How did that all come together?
I'll give you the really candid version of his story, which I think I don't often give. I was 23 years old. I was a waitress at the Keg and Cleaver. I wanted to work in magazines. The staff of Maclean's came in one night and were disgruntled, and I seated them, and someone said, "What do you want to be in life?" And I said, a magazine editor, and I had an interview the next day. And so I was part of a very small group, 28 of us, who launched the weekly Macleans. It was bi-weekly when I started. That's how old I am. So we were under Peter Newman, and it was very exciting. I covered the death of John Lennon. I did cultural. I was the entertainment editor for a long time. And then I left, and I had a fellowship at U of T. And when I came back, I was asked to invent the rankings of Canadian universities. And I burst out laughing. I said, I'm in the word game, not the numbers game. But I worked very hard with a statistician, and we created the Maclean's University rankings. I did that for 14 years and had a big bully pulpit on educational policy. And that's why the transition to McGill, where I was vice principal. But the harder I worked at McGill, by then I had developed, I was a workaholic long before I was an alcoholic, but I was becoming an alcoholic. And I woke up on Father's Day 2007 to the news that my favorite cousin had been killed by a drunk driver. And I sat on my condo floor that day and said, I've lost my childhood to alcohol because my mother was deeply affected by alcohol. I've lost my cousin to alcohol now, and I'm losing myself. And so I started to go to 12-step meetings, and it took me a year and a half to get sober. And I gave up work. I went to ground, basically. And out of that, applied for a big fellowship at the Toronto Star called the Atkinson on Women in Alcohol. It was 2010, and nobody believed that women in alcohol were a problem. And I won the fellowship, which was $100,000 year-long fellowship to look at women in alcohol around the world. And I realized I had a big fish on the line. I had a big story. And out of that series came my book. And that really changed my life. And after the book was published all around the world, it went to auction. I had a very big book deal with HarperCollins. I had daily letters from not just women, but their husbands, family as well, saying, would you help us? And I realized that I wanted to help individuals, and I went back to school. That was tough. I went back to school at 64 to become a psychotherapist. I went to Smith College in the States, took on a lot of student debt, and very hard 3 years. And opened my practice 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago, really. And life moves onward. Here I am.
Well, this is such an interesting topic to cover because it hits so many important pillars of the changemaker leader branding experience that many of our members go through. And that is, finding those aha moments, those milestones, those life-defining changes in your life that rip everything apart. And you've been such an inspiration to me because I've been through so many changes and iterations of who I am as a leader, as a mother, as a friend. And I think that a lot of times we limit ourselves in thinking, well, I can't start over at 30. How can I do something new when, I don't necessarily know how it's all going to work out, right? It is a bit of a gamble. So I appreciate your courage to not only share your story at a time where, that was really frowned upon I think that the way our understanding of addiction, it is evolving, but there is still a stigma, right? So,
oh yes.
How did you make that decision to go public with your story?
I had been very, very aware that my mother's story was a so-called secret, but it wasn't
Mm,
secret. And
mhm,
I decided to not only do the book, I did a TEDx talk, which has 1.5 million views.
mhm,
And so I really blew the story wide open. And what was really incredible was my mother agreed at 84 years old for me to tell her story. Now, I think when I did tell the
wow,
story, it was very hard on her.
mm,
Very, very hard on her. But um, I felt very strongly there wasn't quit lit at that time. There was Drinking
no,
a Love Story by the wonderful late Carolyn Knapp, but that was it.
mm,
And
mhm,
uh, it was really, really important that I call the alcohol industry on their behavior.
mhm,
They having taken aim at women, much like the tobacco industry had taken aim at women. And
mhm,
so I knew as a journalist, I had a big story. I had a big
mhm.
story that I cared about. So it's a complex book and a book I'm very proud of.
Yeah, it was the very first book that I read, that, helped me. At the time, I had stopped drinking alcohol, and it was my first go around of it. It was actually, I remember reading your book before the pandemic. So I was lucky in that I decided to give up my relationship with alcohol prior to the pandemic, and felt that I needed to explore this in a way that I felt less alone. And books have always been the catalyst to feel like I don't know, there's just something about writers writing and their words that means so much to me. And so that was my way of working through, amongst other methods, obviously therapy and, seeking support. Um, but that being said, books were and still continue to today to be the most important way for me to work through how I feel about things. And so when I read your book, I was shocked to hear all the stats. And as a marketer, I also thought it was really interesting. And I've gone on to read other books that talk about the history of alcohol, and actually the very first addiction that was reported in mankind was gambling. And so, it's interesting, like there's different types of addictions. Um, and I think that everybody is generally addicted to something, right? Whether it's workaholism or exercise or food or fame, notoriety, your ego, right? We're all addicted to something. So I think that the more that we are honest with ourselves and with others, then there's no need to carry the shame, and that will allow future generations to have a different relationship with their mental health, with their the stigmas that maybe their family members had faced. Hopefully that cycle will end. And so I love that your mother, uh as difficult as it was okay with being like, yeah, if that needs to be a part of Anne's story, then I'm going to support that.
Mhm.
So I think that's is really amazing. So yeah, so your book meant so much to me on many levels. Just as a marketer, I found it really fascinating. I still talked, on occasion, I will talk about, the alcohol industry and, how prevalent it is in everyday. I remember recently going downtown to an event and they were handing out alcohol on the street. And I was like, what is this? Like, it was just shocking, right? So it's very hard to avoid. It's the one thing that is poison. And, I'm not here to tell people whether they should or shouldn't drink. This isn't what this podcast is about. And frankly, I think everybody makes their own personal decisions about what's right for them. And I'm not here to judge anybody. But I will say that as someone who is now on my second go around of alcohol free living, almost 2 years, And that is a part of our story, actually. And, the very first time that I read your book and reached out to you because a friend of mine took your memoir writing course, Write Your Recovery memoir writing course, Lisa Kelly, who we both love and admire. She's a really amazing person. And she was the very first person who I knew in my world who came out public about her drinking and the fact that she had 5 years of recovery under her belt. And so when I was struggling after the death of my stepfather, and I didn't really know what to do, and I didn't fit the traditional mold of an alcoholic, from the sense of it never impacted my work. I never had a rock bottom moment, but rock bottom was enough for me to feel like this just doesn't feel right to me. And so I made the courageous decision to share with her where I was at. And so she sort of took me under her wing and started to help me. But it was her who took your program. And because I saw, the degrees of connection on Facebook and different platforms, she was connected to you, and I had just finished reading your book. I thought, well, what's the worst that could happen? I'd reach out to her and she'll ignore my message. But I've always been that person that takes chances. And so I reached out to you and said, I was really touched and inspired by your life story, by the work that you've done. I actually sought support from Jean Tweed, which was another place that you worked at. And I was like, wow, I just need to let her know how much her book meant to me. That moment of connection, you wrote back and said, thank you for your kind words. And then I took another courageous step and I said, I really would love to interview you on my podcast. This was like 4 years ago.
Here we are.
And so one thing led to another. And unfortunately, I went back to testing out the waters with alcohol. And by the time you and I were ready to do that podcast, I felt like an imposter. I'm like, I'm drinking again. How could I possibly interview her, knowing what I know and knowing what she knows about me? So I abandoned that. And it wasn't until I finally had the courage that this was my thing and I needed to face it, and I didn't want it to be my thing anymore. We were able to pursue this interview. So it's a full circle moment here for me. And I'm just so thrilled that we finally made this happen. So let's talk a little bit about addiction and mental health and this time of year, which is a huge trigger for many of us. I know that I found it challenging with a lot of the parties, and it's just the thing that everyone connects over alcohol. I know that I've since changed the type of networking events that I offer. It's all about connecting over healthy experiences and not standing around and having cocktail receptions, which I used to do. So I used to host big cocktail receptions as part of my professional life for many years. Alcohol sponsors the whole 9 yards. So I have really come full circle in how I put on events. So let's talk about this time of year. Let's talk about what maybe people might be facing but are afraid or don't know what to think about their drinking.
A very, high proportion of Canadians drink, 79.5%, which is almost 80%, which is way higher proportion than the American number. We like to drink, and so that's mostly because of the American religious right. So if you want to understand those numbers, I won't get too nerdy on you. But this time of year is surround sound messaging, that you can't relax, rewards, celebrate without alcohol. And that's always the case, 52 weeks of the year, but it's really over the top at this time of year. And I think even at, 17 years of sobriety under my belt, I go in very consciously to every event. I was at an event, a big, beautiful party last week in Rosedale, and a bartender gave me a top up of champagne instead of mineral water, and it was, jarring.
Mm.
But I think that I go in armed. I go in well armed to every event. Bring my own drinks always, or if an event like that, I'll drink, mineral water. And I know well ahead of time that I should have eaten, that I should
Mm.
make sure that I am prepared, just prepared to walk into, as I say, this kind of surround sound wallpaper of alcohol messaging. And
Mhm.
I think that nothing stops a party conversation faster when people say to me, "What do you do?" And someone will answer, "Oh, she wrote the book Drink." And the people standing talking to me all lower their glasses and look highly uncomfortable. And it's a real party blooper, or deflator.
Yeah.
But the truth is that I'm very comfortable in my 18th year of sobriety. I'm glad I'm at this stage, and I think the lowest drinking guidelines that came out 2 years ago, where Canada led the way in the world in terms of taking a look at what science said. Not that the science was new, it was in my book, but
Mhm.
linking breast cancer, linking
Mm.
other cancers, linking 200 diseases, saying that 3 measured glasses a week was that no amount was safe for you. All that
Mhm.
happened, there were literally millions of news stories around the world reprinting that news. That was huge news.
Mm.
And we live in a different culture. And I know a lot of people who've changed their drinking habits. Um, the other thing that's happened is the non-alcoholic drink market has exploded. And
Mm.
as you know, offerings such as the Luckiest Club and alternatives to 12-step, not that there's anything wrong with
Mhm.
12-step, have
Mhm.
proliferated. So full disclosure, I'm a host on the Luckiest Club, a role I absolutely adore, and it is one of many options that
Mhm.
people can choose. So the world has changed since I got sober in 2008.
Mhm. Yeah, it's changed for me too, because the first time around, there wasn't as many options, for alcohol-free drinks, and not as many communities, or I wasn't aware of them at least. Now there's so many different ways that, for example, there's Market Your Health that offers networking events for marketers that don't drink. And so, because it's not only just people that are in recovery, some people are doing it for health conscious reasons, like we discussed. Some people are doing it because of religious reasons. What's the difference between women's drinking and men's drinking? What should we know about that?
We metabolize, it's not body size. We
Mm.
metabolize different thing than men do, and that's really important. And so men and women will both get strokes, hemorrhagic strokes, but women will get them at a much higher rate earlier. We
Mm.
become addicted faster with less alcohol than men do, and so
Mm.
we can't go toe to toe with men. And the problem
Mhm.
is, if you look at campus drinking, we have gone
Mhm.
toe to toe. And the difference is, as speaking of the college culture, he
Mhm.
will have had something to eat and he'll be drinking beer. She will not have had anything to eat. She will have been done some pre-drinking with her roommates, and she will be doing vodka shots, and she's
Mm.
at a total disadvantage. So it's something to be really aware of for young women and young
Mhm.
men and young
Mhm.
men. But
Oh, for
yeah,
sure, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember in high school, a male friend of mine having to have his stomach pumped, experimenting and not realizing. Yeah, it's alcohol is one of those, if you abuse it or you make a mistake and you approach it the wrong way, it can have devastating effects.
Yes.
So it's, yeah,
Deadly effects.
deadly. Yes.
Deadly
Devastating and
effects.
deadly. Not to
Right.
mention partner intimate violence, drinking and driving. There's a lot of things,
Mhm.
the rate of incarceration and the lack of addiction, access to addiction support. So, yeah, I think you did a great job of really shedding some light on that. Last thing I wanted to talk about is therapy. So, you are a therapist and you have your own practice and you focus on supporting women as they're going through transitions in life. So, can you walk me through, um, you know, what are some examples of things that generally people will reach out to you to get support on, and how long does a therapy relationship tend to last, and what should we know about working with a therapist? Because I find, and actually this is something my husband and I talked about, he's him and I are in marriage counseling right now, and we're very open about that. We've done it many times in the past before, and we see it as a tune-up for a relationship. And we're also both pursuing having therapy individually. And actually, as part of our marriage counseling process, is we see the marriage counselor individually, to unpack things as
Mhm.
individuals
Right.
and as a couple. So tell me about what um, your practice looks like.
No surprise, I see women's lives as many chaptered. My life has
Mm,
been many chaptered, and I see women's lives as many chaptered. And I have my youngest client is in her 20s, and my oldest client is in
hmm,
her 80s. And
wow.
I have many clients in their 30s and 40s who are dealing with career developments or managing career and family or managing marriages and complexities there, or um, any number of changes, challenges, depression, grief, loss, change, separation. And I consider myself an expert in those now, being in my
Mhm,
70s myself.
mhm,
I find myself able to, um, I couldn't imagine having done this job in my 30s. I
mm,
personally needed this kind of gravitas
mhm,
to be able to comment and hold space for um, the clients that I have, and I adore the work. I adore the work.
mhm,
I also write, so I
mhm.
write and I teach, so it's a full life.
It is, and I love it. Like, I think that the brand coaching that I give my community members is that we're oftentimes multidimensional and we like to do different things. But if you can find a skill set and you can sort of create a really interesting pathway to sort of have one core tenet, which is helping people with their emotional sobriety, let's say, and couple that with your other talent from a past life, which is writing, and something that continues to be so important to you now. It makes for a really unique and fulfilling career. So I just love that for you.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, so we'll start to wrap up our conversation. But I'd like to just, now that we sort of talked a little bit about therapy, we've talked about the way alcohol is showing up in society. I'd like to take just a few moments to talk about, and actually, I do want to finish with one final thought on therapy before I move on to my last topic. And that is the importance of having a therapist before you need a therapist. And that's something that actually, my husband Rob got advice on. So he attended an EAP, sort of like an employee assistance workshop on mental health, and they talked about the importance of establishing a relationship with a therapist, um, before something happens right? Because what oftentimes happens, just like with what happened to me, is that something happens in your life, it's not necessarily expected, and it changes everything.
Right.
And so for me, the catalyst was the death of my stepfather. I wasn't expecting all of the feelings that I felt to occur and to last so long afterwards. And I couldn't find the right person. So, and it's hard to find the right person when you're in a really tough situation. So I think it's really important for anyone to at least establish a relationship with the therapist, so that when something does happen, sometimes without any notice, that you have a safe place to land. So I just wanted to sort of say that as a last and final tip for the importance of pursuing a therapeutic relationship with someone that you trust. And yes, there are all types of different therapists, and they all serve different types of work. So you work with women, and there's all kinds of different ways that you can approach it. Anyway, final topic and final words on writing your recovery. So you realize that as you are moving on in your career and your life, maybe you've had some life-changing, altering experience. Maybe you just realize that you want your story to be written for your family, for when you're no longer with us. Whatever the reason is that you pursue this, what advice do you have to really take full advantage of this program that you offer?
Yeah. What you will learn in the program is two things. You need to have a good voice, a good, strong voice, and you need to have a strong story.
Okay.
And you may have an essay that belongs in the Globe and Mail, or you may have a book that belongs on the shelves at your local bookstore. And you won't know until you get going. And maybe you have a piece for Modern Love in the New York Times. Lucky you. Whatever it is, I will help you find your voice, find your story, help you customize it for landing somewhere, so that it's not sticking in your throat here, but actually coming out of your pores. And I think that's the beauty of the course, is that it prepares you to not listen to that little voice on your shoulder that every writer has, which is, who wants to hear about this? That is the black lung of the writer. And we need to say, no, your voice is important. And we want to hear your story. We're desperate to hear your story. And that's the main reason I do the course.
I love that. And, I always say to people, when a lot of people feel intimidated about, maybe it's like they have a gift to share and they have to sell somebody something, or they want to put on an event and they have to get bums in seats, and you feel overwhelmed, like, who am I to be doing this? And this feels icky. But I always remember some great advice from a fellow change maker by the name of Tobin Smith. I was freaking out. I was hosting an event in Vancouver, and the registration wasn't looking good. And he said to me, Leigh, if one person comes, and of course there was lots of people there, so it all worked out for the best. But that being said, just focus on that one person. If you can change one person's life, that's all that really matters. And it will have the ripple effect. One person tells another person that tells another person. So on that final note, why a group, and how is that different than, hiring a writing coach and working one-on-one?
I work one-on-one. I also work one-on-one, and
So you do both.
I do both. And some people do both, do the class and the writing coaching, and some people only do the coaching. It's delightful to see these groups of people. I also have a group for women who are getting over alcohol, and so lots of groups.
Okay. So a group there too. I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time. I know you have probably clients to see at this time of year. Everyone wants to talk to their therapist around the holidays. So I'm sure that
Thank
you
you.
have to move on. But how can people find you? And do you have any final words of wisdom?
They can find me at www.myname.anndowsettjohnston.com. And the workshops are under workshops. They can enroll. Starts
Perfect.
January the 21st. And words of wisdom. Yeah, you know my words of wisdom. Life has a better imagination than you do. When you put down the glass, down the glass, life has a better imagination than you do. And that was my experience. I never dreamt my book would get published, and it was a mega deal. So there you go. All things are possible.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
This has been fabulous. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.